Good sound. That's a good sound.
And Final Gravity back again. Block 2, Plato 2, Cousin T, the Groovy Bear, the Viking Peaches.
What is up,
Hey.
What's
world?
up, everybody?
What is up, our beautiful 10 listeners? We love you all.
Our 10 listeners.
Are all of our 10 listeners.
We hope
appreciate
you are well out
guys.
there.
Thank
we
you so
appreciate
much.
that. The $1,000 a day you send us is actually making things a lot better right now. So we really appreciate
Wait, you're.
Oh, we
I
didn't
haven't
tell
seen
you?
a dime.
that. Josh, I thought you were the one who was supposed to tell T we weren't paying him.
Don't the
this.
audio engineers just work for tips?
That's some bullshit.
There was a lot of fees, right? Processing the money before it got to, and then once we had it.
Yeah,
it was like Josh and I were
he
like,
had to
well,
pay
we'll just
the
split this.
dog trainer. I'm looking at getting a new van, so
New van, dog
I
trainer.
haven't had a paycheck in 10 weeks.
I have an enormous drug habit. So we'll get you back, I don't know, next time.
I will
Perfect.
not hold you to that.
Copy that.
oh,
Well, it's good to see all of you. Again, I hope our 10
I hope
listeners
none of you
doing
have
well out there.
COVID, and
Crazy
if you
times,
do, I hope we're
Yeah.
providing you entertainment in the hospital.
Yeah, and enjoy your stay. Well, I think it's crazy with all this COVID stuff, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but like I read an article today that Glacier is going to start issuing a phase 1 reopening, where there'll be limited access to going to the Sun Road and bathrooms and some hiking trails, and that's literally it. The establishments in the park will have their own discretion to open up as they see fit, but as far as the park is concerned,
Yeah, I'm
there is
pretty
not
glad
much
I'm
gonna
not
be
working in
open
Glacier
right
again
away.
this summer.
I saw something that the company you worked for last year is like.
They've got a few locations. That's out at the Marion location out in Marion County. They've got it's kind of a
okay.
it's interesting. You call them and they do the rental over the phone and then give you the combination to unlock your boat or paddleboard that you're renting out there. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But anyone in Montana, if you want to go
Gotcha.
canoe or paddleboard out in Marion County, you can rent from Glacier Outfitters.
There you go. Glacier Outfitters, folks.
Shameless plug. Shameless
Yep.
plug. I mean, I have mixed emotions about it. I think it's a little too early.
I think so, too.
I think it's a little too early.
I also think that we're going to see another resurgence before the end of July,
Yeah.
where this is going to pop off and shut us back down. for a
Oh,
while.
I'm pretty thankful.
ahead,
The
Josh.
place that I'm probably going to be working again is slowly reopening, but because they're at limited capacity, they're not busy enough to need me to come on board again for the summer. So I'm hoping if there is a second shutdown or a resurgence that I just don't get, hired and then laid off again or anything. I'm just going to kind of keep chilling until I know that it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I had the option to do so, I would.
Yeah.
Because that's a really smart idea. Because I just have this gut feeling that shit's gonna shut back down again after 2 months of me working, and I'm gonna be, dealing with all of this nonsense once again. Hopefully, the next go around.
This time you'd be
unemployment's
laid
a lot
off,
fucking
not
easier. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
It's a mess, and there's just too many people out there who aren't getting the benefit or the support from the government they need right now. And the fact that the government is now pushing a reopening when those people haven't even gotten what they needed for the last 2 months, and we're not even sure. We just know we ain't there yet, and they're still just like, let's do it. Let's get. I mean, what? So Glacier has limited trails. The same amount of people are
It's
going
going
to
to be a shit show.
Oh yeah.
So now there's limited trails and It's going to be a shit show.
So people are going to be walking all over each other.
And it's not that I don't want Glacier to be open. It's not that I don't want people to have a good time, but it's like, this is, you don't get to just forget what's happening in reality because it's
the
tough
one
to
thing
be
I'll
at
say
home,
about it
you know?
is I think, I get it. You want to travel, you want to go places, you want to do things. Explore your home. Like,
everyone's been stuck at home.
you know,
We're all
don't
bored.
travel from where you are and bring whatever somewhere else or
Start a
whatever
new
you get
hobby.
there
Do
back.
something.
Yeah.
Explore where you are. Visit that place you haven't seen in a while. Go do that tourist trap thing that you've never done because it's a tourist trap. Like
acid wash yourself a new pair of jeans. Who cares?
Learn to
Exactly.
appreciate the IPA. You know, anything.
Speaking of IPAs.
Speaking of which, before we get into tonight's conversation, what are we drinking on tonight, boys?
Josh, have you changed cans, or are you still drinking that delicious Sun River
That's
Brewing
the one.
Vicious
Yep.
Mosquito?
That's the
Sun
beverage
River
of
Brewing,
the evening.
course, 2017 Brewer of the Year, Small Brewer of the Year, and it was Fuzztail. Their Fuzztail Hefeweizen.
That Fuzztail's bomb too. I was standing there at the liquor store staring at the
good packaged half
selection of beers, and knowing we're doing IPAs, and I live in Bend, I was like, okay, I have to pick like a damn good Bend IPA to drink on this episode. And I mean, how could you go wrong with Vicious Mosquito? That's one of the fucking best of the best right there. So that's what we're sipping on tonight.
Absolutely. Hell yeah.
CJ?
I am shamelessly plugging and repping my own brewery tonight with Broken Paddles, Red IPA from Backslope Brewing. At least the brewery that I brew at, I mean. And that's just because I knew we were doing IPAs, and I'm tired of drinking gas station IPAs, which Montana's tough to come by outside beer.
No shit.
And that's all due respect to the big guys, because you guys make great product, but by the time we get it, it's 2 months old, and it just doesn't represent. So I wanted something fresh and excitingly hoppy, and I chose my Amarillo Galaxy Dry Hop.
Oh, yeah? What do you got,
There it is.
Master of Ceremonies, Thomas?
I am sipping on the Earn It from Snake River Brewing at the moment.
How's that treating you?
That's pretty damn good.
It's a tasty beer right there.
That is a taste. This is a really good beer.
Nice.
I didn't read too much on the background of the description of what they put into this beer. It's just, like a straw yellow, super hazy. Good, citrus kind of floral notes on the nose.
Cool.
Drinks good. Doesn't leave you like starving for like doesn't dry your mouth out. You know what I mean? Like it's good.
Would you put it more on the hazy side of things in terms of flavor profile, more on that kind of slightly sweeter IPA?
Yeah, this one kind of bridges a weird gap because it's got like a juicy mouthfeel to it, but it's also got that hazy. It's good.
Copy that. All right.
Interesting crossover.
Well, since we're all drinking IPAs, we should probably explain to the people why we're drinking IPAs.
Well, on the last episode, on our tasting, we went through a series of different IPAs from, what was it, Fremont Hub and what was the third? Founders. Founders was on the last episode. And we're talking about them so we can get the IPA shit out of the way. Second block. There's so many other beers that we need to talk about that are so much better than IPAs. Let's just get this conversation out of the way.
It's fair. I mean, so as a recap for everybody, Plato 2, we're going to kind of do a little bit more education on beer. And tonight we're talking about the beer that, in terms of craft brewing, has outsold everything else.
Kind of the
pretty
beer
much
that brought craft brewing into the mainstream.
And that's I would agree with that too. It kind of was the beer that brought craft beer into the mainstream, and that is the India Pale Ale. Or as
I was drinking IPAs before it was
the
cool.
IPA. Yep. Sipping on Sierra Nevada.
We all were, Josh. We all were.
We're all
pretty fucking old.
Jesus Christ. I mean, there is a pretty decent history about the IPA, according to the website All About Beer. If you want to go and read this article yourself, It's all about Beer Magazine's article on the India Pale Ale, and they start out talking about the original introduction of the IPA kind of came around the 1700s. They were shipping beer over through the East India Company to soldiers and immigrants, trying to keep them
drunk.
satisfied, thirst quenched, you know what I mean? So it kind of ended up falling between 2 or 3 different breweries in England where, what is this? There are a few breweries, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, there were a few, and they kind of traded off between which one was going to win for the contract to send the soldiers the best beer that they could. There were a couple of dark beers that went that they were just not happy with. There were a couple of ale styles that they liked a little bit better. And then one day, someone just packed a whole bunch of shit of hot particulate onto a beer, and it made it to the soldiers, and they were like, this is the fucking one that wins. And that, I believe, the Burton brewmaster, Samuel Alsop, succeeded in that area.
It's my understanding that
became the preferred export.
It's my understanding that the hops actually acted as a bit of a preservative, so the beer would survive the journey and still be flavorful rather than going bad on the long journey by ship. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The alcohol in the beer acts as a natural preservative in and of itself, and the additional hop oils and particulate and plant matter in combination with that allow for a longer shelf life for the beer to be able to travel longer distances, because the alcohol is going to be only able to keep up with so much before it just turns to shit. So luckily those oils and the hops were able to get these guys the good ass beer that has, like CJ said,
seriously,
the beer industry for the last
back in the day before
years.
The wonderful prompt service of the USPS.
Yes,
that's right.
That's right. But it wasn't until after, I think it was like the mid 19th century, that the India Pale Ale started to find its way across the pond, as they would have put it, to us, and we came up with and from that we turned it into the American Pale Ale. That fucking spider was just crawling up the back of my goddamn leg.
Whoa.
That wasn't fun. I'm gonna kill it.
He was going for it, man.
No, thank you. I think he's mad that I kicked him earlier.
Or some bats. We don't know. We just don't know.
I could get superpowers. I doubt it. So after it made its way over, and it was in the 60s and 70s that a couple of American breweries were saved from closure and began the production of the American IPA and the American Pale. And then by the 1980s, Sierra Nevada got their hands on it and turned it into one of the best American Pale Ales that we know today. And then
Shameless plug.
Shameless plugs, of course. But the IPA kind of went in a different direction. A lot of these new craft brewers have tried so many different ways and so many different combinations of grist and hops to make what they deem the best, IPA in the world. And then from that you get all these pseudo beer nerds that are just like, I want something with 120 IBUs in it and all these crazy hop heads, and you're just like, you really think you understand the complexity of that? How many of these have you had today?
Well, it's something that always brings me back to why I love beer is partly the history, and it's pretty fascinating. Again, going back to when Burton won that contract, it's really important for everybody out there who's interested in beer to understand that beer comes about because of an aquifer, because of a water source. And Burton on Trent, where was it James Burton?
Yes,
had his brewery. Had a water source that was really, really, really good at expressing hop flavors. Just down the river in London, they had an aquifer and a water source that was really, really good at expressing malt flavors. They were trying to ship beer, English beer, to their soldiers over in India, and we won't get into what like how imperial. We're not going to get into imperialism tonight, but they were shipping beer over to their soldiers in India, and they didn't want the maltier, richer beers of London. They wanted something drier, more refreshing, and we know, understanding the human palate, that bitter is very refreshing, and it excites the senses. I mean, black coffee in the morning.
I do love coffee in the morning.
It excites the senses. I can't live without coffee. I can't live without coffee at about 2:00 in the afternoon.
Iced coffee all the way.
I'm hit or miss in the cup.
But they also started to learn that, and you guys brought this up already, that hops have antimicrobial properties. Hops effectively can ward off lactobacillus, which at the time was a very prime souring agent in beer. Going back to beer nerds and whatnot, understand that at some point in time in our history, all beer was sour. But the English had preferred this taste for the clean beer they could brew and drink in about 3 weeks before it went sour. And so what they discovered was the more hops you put into a beer, the less likely it was to, in fact, turn sour. The secondary benefit is always alcohol as a preservative. But the original IPA was an oak aged because it had to be. There wasn't steel tanks at the time, so it had to travel around the Horn of Africa in a barrel on a boat that was lurching back and forth, with temperatures rising and falling,
around.
Seawater coming over the bridge, whatever. And it was packed full of very, very, very traditional English varietals of hops like Fuggles and Northdown and Admiral and things like that. Goldings varietals of hops, Whitbread varietals of hops. And so it bears no resemblance to the modern IPA. The modern IPA, as we know it in America, the beer that has taken over the world,
is absolutely nothing
is
like.
a dry, clean, fresh, bitter, citrusy, tropical. Could be fruity. Could be. We have taken this piece of history and we have expanded upon it to a point when, I mean, it's the beer we're all drinking and enjoying, right? And it's the beer I most often pick up off a shelf because it's consistently good.
Unfortunately, people have bastardized it
But it also, the more you keep working on it, the more you keep bastardizing it. And I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about the IPA and conversations about it, which is kind of what we're going to get into tonight. So that just, again, rounding out the history of it, it's a pretty fascinating story this beer has to tell. And every beer we will talk about from here on out has this kind of a story too. That's the amazing thing about brewing and beer, is that everything came out of a need.
It's one of the oldest styles of beer.
Is it? IPA?
I believe. I mean, it's.
Well, they were making a bunch of other beers before they were making IPA, so I'm gonna challenge you on that one.
Well, I mean, as far as like modern beers are concerned.
Well, what's been turned into and maybe branded as a modern beer for sure.
Yeah.
I would say.
No, not like the actual like oldest style of beer, but like as far as like modern beers.
I would definitely say it definitely opened the door for craft breweries, in America. It opened the door for craft breweries in America for sure. So, yeah.
Punching holes in doors.
What else are doors good for?
Yeah. Slamming. Keeping your weird ass roommate out of your space.
I mean, keep bears out of your trailer.
I don't. That too, I guess. Yeah, I don't want to get into the conversation about my old roommate. Right
That's
now.
not why we're on a podcast.
Nope.
No, but we will get through all of this dry bit of. I mean, as much as we all enjoy, the history, and we get excited about like where these beers come from and stuff. There is obviously a bit of just like, okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
But we still have to roll through like the IBU and the International Bittering Unit and what that means as far as the beer you're drinking versus how everyone's palate is completely different and perceived bitterness, where you and I can sit down and put beer recipes together and create something that's got somewhere between 45 and 60 IBUs. Could be a completely different combination of hops and a completely different beer, and they're going to taste completely different. So the folks, like I said before, these hop heads that look for like the highest IBU count, I think are missing the point of what the IBU is actually for. It's to give you an indication, because you can hit 120 IBUs with Hallertau or something that's got super low AA or something like that. It's going to take a lot of hops to get there, but you're going to get a completely different flavor than if you were to throw, 5 pounds of Citra on a gallon of beer and get 150 IBUs, or something like that. So I think that there's a lot of misconception with people's understanding of what that number actually represents and how it's a subjective number based on the person that's drinking it.
I really think that the professional beer community did itself a disservice early on by branding beers with IBUs. I really think that we did ourselves a disservice there. It's very confusing. It doesn't make sense to the consumer. And what we've done is create a system where a value has been assigned to a number that we never intended it to have. IBU stands for International Bitterness Unit, and it is the common way that brewers measure what will be our perceived bitterness for the beer that we're making. It is a general threshold, but that doesn't take into account the next dimension where everybody's palate's different. It doesn't take into account the fact that, Josh, what you might perceive to be a mango aroma in beer or a orange flavor in beer, I might perceive to be lemon and papaya. And that's not, those are wrong answers, right? When we taste beer, we are actually very much, subjective. There are some hardline things, but on the whole, when you taste anything,
I mean, even last week, the second beer we tasted, the Hub one, you were tasting notes of guava in it, and I just didn't get any guava out of it.
Right. And you know what?
Or I could have.
I could have been wrong.
Or we both could have been totally right.
But both of us also could have been right.
Yeah,
both of us also could have been right.
There is no right or wrong in that.
That's kind of the fun of tasting. It's kind of how you have to always, bring yourself back. So when we speak about the IBU or the International Bittering Unit, like anything, when we started to produce formulas on how to replicate beer and how to identify beer and why things were working a certain way, we had to start with some arbitraries. We had to start with some made up fucking numbers, right? That's just how you have to start. And then you see the correlation between those made up numbers. And as you start finding things out, you start shaping those numbers down to what actually becomes a real solid formula. Excuse me. But Josh, what I perceive to be 45 IBUs in an IPA, you might perceive to be 60 because maybe you're just more sensitive to bitterness. Maybe you're more sensitive to polyphenols, which can produce bitterness, not just the alpha acids that are isomerized in the boil. There are too many factors in just how beer produces bitterness for us to have one number that says this is 30 and this one's 40 and this one's 50. It doesn't work like that. For us, it's so we can identify, and for our metric, I can say, to my palate, with the numbers that I've been given, that's what 35 IBUs should taste like. That's what the Tinseth scale or I forget the other name of the other scale, that's what it says 35 IBU should taste like. But I might taste a 40 IBU beer with some caramel malt in it and perceive that to be much sweeter than the 35 IBU beer I just tasted. So there comes in the next factor where residual sugar, alcohol, hop content, aroma, they all play this idea in balancing out the International Bittering Unit. So it seems kind of like a falsehood to just say my beer is 40 IBUs, it's an IPA, or my beer is 80 IBUs, so it's better than your IPA. Like that doesn't make any sense. It's a very simple metric that got put into a branding, and I would sit here and say still that my brewery puts the IBUs on the boards. And the way I've chosen to fight that battle is to explain to my servers, like, if you make a pale ale and it is 30 IBUs, it's probably perfectly balanced. If you make a barley wine and it's 30 IBUs, it's going to be so sweet and cloying it's undrinkable. So there's too many metrics to just say, it's 45 IBUs. And like anything in America, and we've talked about this before, there's this war to like make things bigger and stronger and more bitter, and that's better.
And that's another point I was going to bring up later. Is like the war between the East Coast and the West Coast style IPAs. It's not really a war, but it just seems to be a competition of like who can make a better version of their style.
You guys remember when Stone Ruination came out, right?
Yeah.
Josh,
Yeah.
you remember when Stone Ruination came out? Fucking 100 IBUs, the most vicious IPA you could have from a brewery that has a reputation of making vicious IPAs. And by the way, Stone IPA, Godfather beer. But nowadays, if I drank that, I couldn't drink anything else for the rest of the day and taste anything. I mean, it lives up to its name.
Yeah,
it's a palate wrecker.
Yeah.
And here's the other crazy thing about the IBU, and again, like you said, 8 years ago, we'd be labeling beers 120 IBUs, 140 IBUs. The human palate physically can't taste anything off at past 100. That is the I think it's actually 95, but we'll call it 100 for the metric's sake of keeping everything in tens. That's the beauty of the system. We went from 0 IBUs to 100. It's not bitter at all from the hops or the isomerized acids to you cannot taste anything else. That was the scale. So this whole war pushing it like I'm brewing an IPA.
I shoved 500 pounds of hops into my 5-gallon batch of IPA.
That's going to wreck your palate. Yeah, it's going to wreck your palate.
Let me ruin the rest of your beer afternoon and tasting experience with one single beer.
Isn't it funny to think that it came from, going around the Horn of Africa, and it was just like, hey, we just need to add just enough hops to make sure the beer's stable. To being like, I shoved so many fucking hops in this beer, you won't be able to taste anything for a week. Like that was the American.
And then for a long time, even to this day, you get so many customers coming into restaurants that think that that's like what IPAs are supposed to be, and then they think that like they have to be cool and be drinking IPAs. So they come in and they sit down. They're like, what is the most bitter beer that you have? So you fucking tell them, and they're like, oh, that's easy. And then they're drinking it. And they're like, oh, this is so bitter. I'm like, well, no fucking shit.
So what you asked for.
It has become the symbol of understanding craft beer, which, not to knock the IPA or the producers of great IPA, but it's a damn good beer. It's a really refreshing beer, and we've put a lot of development and agricultural time into hop development. But man, it's as somebody brewing every day, I want people to experience other things besides IPA, and I want to see packaging available to other things besides IPA, especially out here in Montana. I mean, I kind of had it gold a few years ago in Portland. Josh, you're pretty close to that.
I got a lot of stuff around here.
But I mean, IPA is not going anywhere. It's amazing, and it is really fun to make and to drink and to accept. But it should share the spotlight. A lot of its great features exist in other beers as well. In my opinion, especially in the where we're at now with the game, where even the West Coast IPAs, I feel like everybody's making pretty balanced stuff, pretty refreshing stuff.
I think the mentality that like you have to be drinking IPAs to be a beer nerd, or like you have to love IPAs to love craft beer and stuff. Like I've been told a few times, I'll sit down and be ordering a Pilsner and stuff, and a lot less recently. But I remember, a few years ago, sit down and order something, and someone else would be like, you're drinking a Pilsner? Oh, it's IPA or nothing for me. I said, well, there's other craft beers out there besides fucking IPA. It's not the only craft beer in the world, and it's not always the best craft beer in the world. Yes, it's great sometimes, but if you only drink the same thing ever, how are you ever really going to learn and expand what you know about it?
It is crazy how people attach themselves to brands even too. Like I only drink IPA, and when I go to this brewery, I drink their IPA, and it's my favorite IPA, and it's the best one. And it very well might be, but it's funny how you have this expansive industry of amazing flavors, and it's like America dropped the bomb on just like we're gonna do IPAs. We're gonna fucking kill it. But we shouldn't be knocking the style. It's an amazing style.
And we definitely killed it.
We did. We did.
Like as much as I love how expansive and extensive and experimental the IPA game has gotten in the last 10 years, I'm pretty sure we just run it into the fucking ground at this point.
How do you mean? How do you mean by that?
Because everyone's trying to go after the same thing, and they've all been doing it. And everyone claims that they have the best IPA. Listening to another podcast earlier today where they was they were talking about Tombstone Brewing, and how their description on the side of the can was like, "This is the closest you're ever gonna get to drinking a can of hop juice." Like, there's so what? And it wasn't, according to their feedback.
Right.
You know, it's I think we've just run the IPA into the ground, and I think that we should, as brewers, start looking at other styles to really enlighten people into what craft brew can really be, other than just
Yeah.
a juicy IPA,
Well, and
or a hazy IPA, or a New England or a Texas IPA, or wherever fucking locality you live that you have a branded IPA. Like, there's more to
well, and
craft
to
beer than
CJ's
just
point,
IPAs.
where he was talking about people beyond just being loyal to the IPA, they get so brand loyal too. Huge case of that around Bend, and it's gotten better recently. But there's a brewery over here, Boneyard Brewing, with their RPM IPA, which it is a very good, very well done IPA, and I fucking love Boneyard. I drink a lot of their beers. But when I used to be a bar manager downtown, I would have people come into the restaurant that I was working at behind the bar, so excited about showing their friends our food. And, our friends are in from out of town. We love your burgers. We're so excited for them to eat them. And then they actually left because we didn't have the RPM on tap. Like, if you didn't have RPM on tap in Bend, you were losing business, which, yes, it's a fantastic beer, but also you live in the town with the most breweries per capita in the entire United States, which that was at that time. I don't know if we still hold that still not. So maybe not anymore, but still, like, 30 breweries in the area. Every brewery makes like at least, a fucking dozen different beers a year, if not well more than that with rotating seasonals. And you only ever drink this one IPA from this one brewery, and you call yourself the craft beer head.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't. But
Yeah.
again, Boneyard RPM, fantastic, and especially before they had to go big. And to be clear, I love making IPAs. Hops fascinate me. Hops are an amazing plant, and the way that they are cultivated, the fact that it takes 7 to 10 years to get a new variety to market, the amount of work that our hop, like, it's a brewing an IPA is a special thing. It's a bummer that so many people have kind of bandwagoned and jumped onto, the success of somebody else. So we'll just kind of make our version of their IPA rather than being like, no, let's sit down and actually look at our product, look at our.
Like, I personally, as much as I've been clowning on IPAs, like, I love sitting down and designing the hop profile for my IPAs and trying to put together. I'm never going to put together a combination that another brewer hasn't already thought of or tried to do. But there are little things that you can, like, it might be the time that you throw them in, or how long. Like, do you put them in a whirlpool? Do you put them in at 30 minutes? Do you put them in at 10? And everybody will have a slightly different schedule. And yeah, that will produce a different beer 1,000 different times just by changing the time or the amount, or things like that. So I do enjoy that part of the science of it, but I also am starting to look into other things that I don't see a lot of home.
And as someone who doesn't brew a lot of beer, but drinks a lot of beer, IPAs, it is definitely, because it's become such a staple, and it's a relatively simple recipe to get down, to just make a basic IPA. It is one of the big ways I judge a brewery when I first go to them. Like, obviously you have your specialty breweries like Monkless, who only does Belgian style beers for the most part. You've got Wayfinder, who specializes in lagers up in Portland. But your average craft brewery tries to make a little bit of every different style. So if I'm on a vacation where I'm just there to drink beer and try out different breweries, usually the first beer I order at each place I go to is probably going to be an IPA, if it's just your general craft brewery that's making a bunch of different styles, because it does kind of show, did they just make a standard IPA? Did they embellish on the IPA recipe? How did they do with the IPA? It's kind of a
Yeah, I feel that's a good and bad way to look at it. Like you can gauge a brewery like, okay, like IPAs are being made all over the country. Let me see what these guys are doing. They have a decent IPA. You're probably like, okay, let me see what other weird or like not so typical stuff they've got on tap, and I'll try that now. Or I mean, unless you go to a brewery that you know is specifically going to
yeah.
be like lagers, like Wayfinder, or sours at Cascade, or
Belgians at
I don't know,
Monkless
I'm
or
not references. Or Belgians at Monkless, yeah. You know, like unless you know
Shameless
hell
plugs
yeah, Ale
across the
Apothecary
Oregon
sours all the
Barista
way.
yeah.
I mean, I do, and I agree with both of you, but I definitely would say, jumping around Josh's point, that if aside from specialty things, if you're going to say you're an American brewery, here's what's more important: is if you're going to put an IPA
Exactly.
out there right now, it better fucking be good.
Yep.
That's where I sit with it. Is it better fucking be good? The work has been done on the hop research side and still being done, and there are new papers being published regularly about how compounds change, break down, transform, how dry hopping works. I mean,
Yeah, with all the information out there, if you can't make a good IPA on a commercial or home scale or even from a kit,
then don't even put it out there.
then
Don't even put it
I
out
mean,
there.
that's the
stop
thing,
brewing
like-
beer.
Well, I mean, but you
No,
you couldn't say it
being-
because you couldn't say it to Monkless or things like that. I mean, there are breweries that have made it work without an IPA. There are breweries that have made it work, doing that. There are also breweries, if we're sticking in the Portland scene, unfortunately, the Commons that were amazing that refused to do that, and it didn't work. And I know there's breweries elsewhere that have done it too, but if you're going to be an American brewery, if you're going to have a porter, you damn sure better be able to make a fucking IPA. If you're going to have your honey blonde ale or your session ale or your pale ale, you damn sure, or your what is the other one, like a good oatmeal brown, you
Yeah.
damn sure better be making IPA.
Same
Like the information is out there. Go study it. Go look at it. It's not a game where you want to be the last horse in the race. Like it really isn't. It's actually a game where you could do very well by being
Right
a
in the
middle
middle.
You
horse.
don't
in
need
the
to have
race.
the
Right in the
best
middle of the
IPA
pack.
on the market,
Because
but if you're
it
making an
is-
IPA, it better be a fucking decent IPA.
And I mean, again, Josh over there is holding one of the best IPAs,
I'm
at
spoiled.
least in his area of the world's market, and that they're at, so it's not hard to make a good one. It does take a little bit of time and research and love to make a great one, and there are it's a broad category, and I think that was something we were going to talk about tonight too. Is the broad category, the difference between West Coast and East Coast. I mean, if you look at GABF now, there's a white IPA, a red IPA,
A rye.
a blonde IPA, a rye IPA, a brown
Coffee
Black.
IPA is like,
and
Yeah, there's like 16.
it's the most expansive style in the GABF guidelines. I'm pretty sure I'm saying that without the guidelines in front of me. So, but it is. I mean, America's in love with it. The emerging beer scenes in the world, like even in Japan, are falling in love with it in their own way. And it's a style that really, now the guidelines are so broad for what to define it as. Again, it used to be this very humble product that bears no resemblance to what it is, and now we have every kind of IPA in the world. And still more comfortable.
protein powder
Milkshake,
IPA.
Yeah, milkshake IPA.
brute.
Yeah, brewed IPA, protein powder
Protein
IPA.
powder.
Ooh. But like when you go to like GABF and look at some of the criteria for other categorizations like porters, stouts, lagers, pilsners, like there are very few variations.
Everything's got some things allowed in it, but I would wager to
IPA
bet that
Easily.
IPA is
Ale.
the broadest right now.
Yeah.
But again, it's thrilling to see new hop varieties hitting the table. It's thrilling to see people experimenting with new products, with new techniques. From my perspective, always getting into this industry, the two things that keep me around are the history of the product and how much soul goes into it, and the massive amount of flavor potential out there. And whether you're a home brewer or a professional brewer, that doesn't really matter. If you kind of take a moment and conceptualize what you're working with, it is insane. It's insane. They're still identifying chemical compounds in hops. There's things that we don't know about them. That's the kind of the coolest thing is that because so much research over the last decade has been done on hops, that's why the IPA is so fascinating to the beer nerds. There are just people who are like, man, a good bitter beer, that's great. But to the beer nerds out there, not just intentionally speaking for all of you, like the fascinating thing is we're just brushing the surface.
Oh yeah,
We're just brushing the surface.
Right.
There's a lot to still be done. The IPA is getting burned out because everybody's kind of playing the same hits. The bummer is there's some B-sides there for sure. There's some things that can be done to make great beer. So
absolutely.
again, Josh's
I'm
can.
so happy right
I'm kind
now.
of jealous of the vicious mosquito right now, Josh.
You're gonna have to send us some of that
I'm
now.
gonna go get some more backslope beer because I can't have the vicious mosquito.
All right, then. Why don't we take a quick musical break here? My buddy Parker was over at the house earlier today and recorded some tracks for his new album. His name is Parker Duncan. Project's called
Also, quick shout out. He is
Predator
an
Star.
author. Winds of the Immortal. I'm about halfway through it. It's his first novel in a series. Fantastic fucking book. You should check it out.
Awesome. Thanks for the plug, Josh. I couldn't remember
Nah.
the name of the book.
It's a
off the
really
top of
good
my
book.
head, so
It's
I'm glad you did that.
kind of future or leading into post-apocalyptic sci-fi type dystopia stuff. Very interesting book for anybody out there interested in doing some reading.
Nice. Well, this is a track that will be off an album that will not be released for probably another 2 years. These were just some scratch checks that he wanted to lay down for the artist to be able to learn. But this section, like, I was listening to him play, and it just kind of like grabbed me by like the fucking. I don't even know, like the consciousness basically. It was just like, listen to this. So check this out, and we will be right back. Shit. Well, I gotta turn that off.
Nailed it.
Shit
Whoops.
almost started over on us.
Whoops.
Yep. Damn that random play.
Perfect
Well, at
timing,
least I
in
made it
fact.
back in time. That was a very, very long pee. Felt like I was in there forever.
I don't think our 10 listeners need to know that. I think it's too much information.
Whatever.
Well, now they do, so.
Now it's nothing. Now it's just there.
I'm not gonna edit that out. I really don't
I
care.
hope you do. I voted for edited out. Let's just know that.
There's something to be said about just
I vote
raw.
for not editing out because it's way
liveness.
less work on the video end that way.
Ouch. So how do we finish up this episode? How do we wrap up the IPA talk? Because I still have another beer to drink, and I want to give a shout out to my homebrewer buddy Billy, who dropped off a Mexican style cerveza
Well,
that I want to crack open and share with you.
We're doing an IPA episode, and you want to crack up a Mexican lager and switch course.
I could talk about the beer all day.
Well,
doesn't
I
mean
think
have to
we've
drink
pretty
it.
well covered
I guess
history
that's
and
fair.
obviously a lot of our feelings about IPA. But what is
Yeah, you guys apparently do not care for it.
I mean, I drink the shit out of it. That's the fucked up
you know,
thing.
I judge it a
You
lot,
know?
but I drink it a fuckload. So, call me a hypocrite or
Yeah.
And that's probably why, because we drink so much
I just
of it.
I just think
It's true.
IPAs in general
Shit
are
out of it.
overhyped. I still love the beer, but I think they're overhyped. Like there's some cultish movies out there which I think they're fantastic movies, but they're overhyped, right?
Sure.
Anything
sure.
by Kevin Smith. No, not overhyped at all. I love Kevin Smith.
No, I know what y'all mean. And again, there are a lot of
Yeah.
average IPAs out there, and that's pretty lackluster. And then not to bash breweries, but that's like, it's also something that I look forward to seeing kind of take a subtler hand and work on nuance, because so many other beer styles out there are nuanced, and the IPA is pretty brash. But I feel like you can, round things out a little bit. But it's also, it's not going anywhere. It's still the
here
most
to stay,
quaffable
that's for
American
sure.
beer being brewed right now. So
I
Beer style, anyway.
can't disagree with that at all. I am gonna go get this beer real quick. I wonder, do we pick on breweries that specifically just do IPAs? I mean, I don't really want to do that. Although I did hear something interesting that
I don't think we should pick on them, because I think there's some breweries that focus specifically on IPAs
Yeah.
that are mind blowing too. I mean, Treehouse.
Treehouse. Yep, that's a good point.
I mean, Hill Farmstead doesn't specifically focus on IPAs, but Hill Farmstead's IPAs are some of the best in the world.
I don't know if I want to
Russian
bring up
River Valley. They don't focus on IPAs, but they have some of the most iconic.
the Pliny the Elder.
And so I don't think we pick on any breweries. I
OG.
know that what you're going after, and I do agree with this, is the gimmick IPA right now. It's become so popular of a style that people are just kind of trying to overly emulate and overly overthink what an IPA is, and I'm all for the weird shit, but it doesn't need to be this extravaganza. If you're shoving Skittles into your Randall to pour your IPA over,
Yeah.
you've drastically overthought beer. It doesn't need to.
Well,
be
then I
that
think
way.
that I think that might be part of where my judgment of
if you're-
IPAs comes from. Is I do love the simple, classic, decent amount of hop, slightly bitter IPAs, but it's when people start pushing a lot of adjuncts and stuff into their beers, they do tend to be doing it with the IPAs because it's such a standard thing to brew. So they're like, what can we do different? And then they start
Sure.
overthinking it, and then they're making protein milk IPAs and shit. And it's just like, okay, pause.
Stop
Right.
what you're doing.
Right. No, it's
And I think that's the point. Like, that's the word I'm looking for. It's like the gimmicky IPAs.
Yeah.
That are, like these breweries that open and they go after the gimmicky IPAs because they're just looking for like the financial gain, because they see the margins on how well you can profit from making beer aside from like an absolutely catastrophic event. So they jump on this like financial bandwagon in a sense too. And I think for me personally, like that behind the scenes, like pretentiousness to be like, let's just open a brewery and just make a bunch of IPAs so we can make a bunch of money.
It's not what it's about.
Like, that's not. That's for us. Obviously, it's not what it's about, because we love the craft, we love what goes into it and the design, not only of the beer, but like of how each brewery's got its own process and its own environment and its own atmosphere and everything else. Like, there's something to be said about walking into, like, even when we were in Portland, Josh, like walking into, nearly a dozen and a half different breweries over the course of like 5 days. Like, every place has like its feeling to it. You know, and some of these places that you walk into that are all about like the gimmicks and stuff, when you walk in the door, you can feel that. And you're just like, oh, this is like Universal or fucking or like the Land of Tomorrow. Like this is it's all gimmicky and made to like distract you from.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fun to drink craft beer, and I think certain people have capitalized on that, and maybe aren't always making beer that I believe represents, the craft brewing industry. But it's out there. You know, people got their freedom of choice. If I walk into a brewery and I see nothing but New England hazy IPAs and adjunct stouts, I know this isn't the brewery for me. That's just personal. Maybe it's the brewery for somebody else, but that's not the brewery for me. If I walk in and see a sprawl of flavored beers and whatnot, that's not for me. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy the additions of fruit or spices or adjuncts to beer. I do. But if I walk in and I see everything from guava mango to raspberry peach on the board, I know what's happening in the back, and I'm not begrudging anybody for doing it. I mean, everybody's got a right to run a business.
Of course.
But as someone who makes beer and is very passionate about beer, if you're going to make an IPA, you make it with, malt, water, hops, and yeast. And obviously, I've seen some great other adjunct IPAs. But the point is, you don't have to fluff this shit up, man. I mean, it's been
like
done
one of
for
my favorite
1,000
IPAs
years.
in the summertime.
All right. Like, excuse me, it's only like 400 years, but I'm not good with math. I'm good with IPAs though.
1,000? Well, the IPA is 400 years. The
Beer's
beer
multiple
is
thousand.
over 1,000.
Right. But and I'm not begrudging people who make beers using interesting products. I celebrate that, but I think the IPA has been bastardized over the years. I really do, and it's and what's popular now is very far away from what it was. And if you, I know that I enjoy progress being made. Like I often make the argument at my brewery when I do things off color that it's like, well, if Belgian brewers had Nelson Sauvin, they would have been fucking using it. Am I right? And everybody's like, yeah, I guess you're right.
Probably.
It's like, yeah, absolutely. So we have to use new ingredients. We have to change. We have to adapt. We have to push forward. But we don't have to bastardize. We don't have to totally take something and be like, just because I put these 3 letters on it, I'll wait to pour my own.
Okay.
Just because of time.
Well, it's just this is the only one that there is.
Oh, it's all in there. Okay. Copy that.
And
well,
I mean,
how is it?
We work together, so it's.
I know.
It's well, it was more
just smell it.
Smell it.
Well, while you're smelling that, just to emphasize CJ's point, like one of my favorite summertime beers is the Mango Days, which I'm pretty sure is an IPA. If not, it's just a pale ale from Silver Moon Brewing, and it's your standard kind of classic ale with mango added into it. I'm not sure if they just used adjunct flavors or if they actually put mangoes in the thing, but it's not every single beer. They're not all flavored. It's not all of their beers. They have their standard IPAs, they have their stouts, they have their porters, and then they have some flavored beers too, which I happen to really love. But when you walk in there, it's not like this list of 15 fucking flavorful, weird, different beers. There's just a few of them to accent a list of already really good beer.
Yeah. Well, and again, to clarify, like those flavors are out there in the products that we already have. So I feel like it's kind of sometimes, and maybe I'll get clapped back at for this, but sometimes with breweries, it's kind of the reason it's a gimmick is it's kind of a cheap method of getting flavor into beer easy. And I get it, but like I'd rather focus
so then these
on
guys don't have to worry about like research or anything else though.
The work that goes into making those flavors from the products that we've already been given, and they are sensational products. So I'm not begrudging the brewery that I work for makes a peppermint porter. The brewery that I work for makes a gluten-free beer that we flavor, and we flavor it for a very good reason. We want people to have a gluten-free option, and we're not going to make hard seltzers, so this is as close as we're coming to touch it. But we also really embrace local products. We also really embrace local ingredients. And we also really embrace the idea that these flavors were here long before we had concentrates. And people had to work on them to get them out. And that's part of the process, too. So I'm not saying if you dump some aseptic puree in your beer, you're a bad person. I'm saying the IPA has been bastardized, and look for those flavors and the ingredients that you have. You know, you have dozens of modern hop varietals now, which express everything from pineapple and stone fruit to cedar. You know, so
yeah, it's like I'm gonna make a lemon bar like spruce tip IPA.
Sure,
but go ahead, but don't throw lemon bars into your mash.
That's not creativity.
That's
right?
not creativity.
You know, I mean,
I would
That
love
sounds
a lemon bar
fantastic.
spruce tip IPA, but you can get those flavors
well, that
out
actually
of.
does sound good.
You can get those flavors out of how you build your malt, how you put your hop profiles together, and then throw.
Fuck, I could
in
actually
the
just go for a
spruce tip
lemon bar
adjunct,
now.
Yeah.
You know.
Josh, make us lemon bars. Make them now.
Yeah, make them so I can put them in my beer. Just kidding. I'll figure out how to do that.
For sure. Well, are there other things we have to address with the IPA?
I think
I think we've covered
the
her
IPA
from head to toe.
From head to toe.
She's like a nun, man. She's wrapped up.
From head cheese to toe cheese. She's wrapped up.
Well, I think beer is a very complex subject, and we've gotten as much done as we can do.
We'll
in
probably have a
reasonable amount of
future
time.
IPA episode again. It's just such a fucking common beer. But for now,
Yeah, hopefully, in a few years, if this if the trend ever dies off and like a more traditional style of IPA tries to come back, that would be, I think, interesting.
I think to our 10 listeners, if we didn't cover your questions, write us in. We'll try and do a mini about it. All right. This has been the two Plato IPAs.
Absolutely. We'd love to
questions,
answer 'em for
comments,
you.
all the things.
Even if like one of you talked to us to let us know you weren't a bot, I would not cry myself to sleep every night.
Yeah, just a little bit of feedback might be
Say
fun.
what's up.
All right, y'all. Final Gravity, Block 2, Plato 2, completed. Cousin T, the Viking Peaches in Oregon, CJ the Groovy Bear. Enjoy the last bit of one more cup of 20 grams before the album is done. So enjoy this, folks.